Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Dunns. Today we are discussing Judges chapter 19, and it's a doozy. So it is JB Squad and mostly Preacher Hubs.
That's right. We decided to just go ahead and do this one without the boys because it is a gruesome story, and it's got questions that we want to process as a family and not online. How about that? Hopefully you can understand that. This is a chapter in Judges, and remember, the latter chapters of the book of Judges are events that probably happened all throughout. They don't deal with any particular judges. As a matter of fact, they're really just dealing with Levites. The Levites are the ministers of the community, the ministers of the nation, and all of these terrible stories have to do with them, and it's supposed to make us think, well, if this is how the people of God are behaving, the ministers are acting, how bad is it in the rest of the country? Well, if you're wondering that, it literally shows us what's happening in the rest of the country. So let me just kind of give the gist of the story. There is a Levite in the story, and he's got what the Bible calls a concubine. Now, this is kind of a broad term, but let me just kind of give it to you gently. A concubine is a lady that a man marries, but he doesn't marry like he marries a wife.
A proper wife.
That's right. So she is a wife in terms of they live together, they are fully married, but she's more like a servant. Mm-hmm. And so even if they have children together, those children do not receive an inheritance from that father. Mm-hmm. So there's all the ties in that relationship, but none of the commitment. And good grief, can we just say, what in the world is a Levite? Somebody who specializes in serving God, specializes in the law. What's he doing with a concubine anyway? And then he's probably, things aren't great because it begins with him kind of running off and trying to, go back. And she leaves him. And he has to go find her at her daddy's house. She goes back home. It's just a terrible story. But things get even worse when they start delaying going back home and putting things back together. Matter of fact, over and over in the story, you see the word tomorrow. Like in verse 9, tomorrow go your way early so that you may get home tomorrow. See, a lot of things get delayed till tomorrow that probably ought to be done today. And, it's just a kind of a quick takeaway. Well, as they start traveling home, it starts to get dark. And the Levite here, he basically doesn't want to stop in a Canaanite city. He says in verse number 13, he says, come and let us draw near one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or in Ramah. Now, here's why these two cities are mentioned, because it's trying to give you an overall picture of how bad things have gotten, because Judges is the story of how far a society can go when God is taken out of it. Okay? There's a downward drift and it just gets ugly. Well, Gibeah is where Saul comes from, who's the first king of Israel. Ramah is where Samuel comes from, who is the first prophet in Israel like this. And so these two cities that's going to eventually give both a king and a prophet, these are the cities that are on. And guess what? They're not great. Yeah. It's not that they're going to produce something great because they're great. No. God is going to give some gifts in spite of how bad things go. And when they get there, they find nowhere to stay. So there's no room in the inn. Now, we're supposed to be thinking about other stories in the Bible. There are other stories in the Bible where there's no room in the inn. And then a man of peace comes out. Jesus said, look for people of peace, And so in verse 20 it says, and the old man said, peace be with you. Let all your needs be my responsibility. So when Israelites talk about peace, they even say this today. The word is shalom. And so it means hello, goodbye, but it means peace. And so he says peace to them. But truth is, God is the only true source of peace. And so even when they go home with him, it gets ugly. That night reminds us of another story in the Bible. Which one is it?
Genesis chapter 19.
Yeah. Genesis chapter 19 is the story of what cities?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah. And do you remember what happened with Lot and his family and the two angels? And what happens here and how the people are knocking on the door trying to get them to come outside and they're to be immoral. I mean, these are terrible stories. And what it's saying is that Israel has become just like Sodom and Gomorrah, who got burnt to the ground with fire and brimstone. They were put into the land to be image bearers of God and share God's glory with the nation. Instead, what's happened here is they have become fully Canaanite in the way they're living. This is as bad as Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's what I want you to remember. Now, the Bible does give us a little bit, at least there's this one guy. 1 Peter 4:9 tells us to show hospitality, be hospitable to one another without grumbling. This guy was hospitable, but his community was not. There's not a whole lot we can really say that's good about this story.
But believe it or not, reading this story and then thinking about the things that I struggle with today. I look at society today. I don't like to watch the news because of it makes me sick at my stomach. How gross the world is, how sinful, how we don't act like Jesus is our king, how God is not our king. And here it's God's very own people chosen by him, and they're treating him like he's not their king also. Yeah. But where I find hope is that when I think my society, the world that I live in today is hopeless, I see that sin is the same. Sin is the same back then. But even though this is such a super dark time right now, Judges has been rough. It's a really dark time for God's people. I know the rest of the story. And I know that applies to them, and I know that applies to us. And so although that is a dark time, it still pushes me forward, looking to Jesus. And I think it's Terry Cobble that says, hold on, friends, although it's dark right now, light is coming.
Yeah. I think also we need to remember always what Jesus told us. In one of Jesus' teachings, he teaches us that we need to deal with the plank in our own eye before we start dealing with the speck in our brother's eye. So at the end of this story, this Levite, he's playing the victim. Look what's happened to me. Look what happened to my wife. Look, and like they are really like the people are trying to purge this evil from Israel. Like he is putting on a show at the end of this, and he is angry. And in chapter 20 that you're going to read next time, like they go into civil war over this one event. And it gets really ugly. But this guy, it's like he sees no fault in his own life. It's interesting to me that at the beginning of the story, like in verse 3, it says, then her husband arose and went after her. So in verse 3, it says that he is her husband, whereas in verse 27, it says, and when her master arose in the morning. Well, good grief, what is he? Is he her owner or is he her husband? Is he the good guy of the story, or does he have a lot? Does
there's
he have
a
his own
reason
trouble?
she ran away in the first place.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Well, she was unfaithful to him.
Oh.
Yes, she was unfaithful to him. But evidently, this guy's got no compassion for her. This is a terrible story, and there's not one single bit of shining light in this deal. But like Jen said. I said this even Sunday. When you hold your Bible up and look at the book of Judges, here's all that has happened. Here's all that will happen on this end of the Bible, which means God is going to do way more after this than even he did before this, which means this does not say, he doesn't throw his hands in the air and say, nope, I'm done. I'm out. Y'all are finished. I'm done with you people. No. He is long-suffering, patient, compassionate, and tender. And by the way, he'll send his own son to die for us. He fixes what we have embraced as broken because we don't follow him without Jesus. Friends, look up and just know this is what the cross was for, to fix what sin broke. All right? Keep reading. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.